Welcome back to the garage here at Basin Motorsports. I'm Canaan. You guys know in the past I have taken my Corvette interior up a little bit with adding a plaid interior. Now this is a blue plaid with black mixed in. And one of the things I never did was refinish the Corvette steering wheel. The leather on it is in good shape, but I also wanted to add a little bit of customization. So today I'm going to show you the process of ordering and installing a steering wheel cover from StitchingCover. This is going to be leather Alcantara with custom blue stitching that matches the stitching in the Corvette. Now, one of the things that is not required in order to do this process is to take off this airbag, but because I am trying to demonstrate and get in nice detailed shots, I'm going to take this airbag off. Again, not required, but if you want to take it off, all you need to do, disconnect the battery, make sure that the power on the capacitors is all drained out, so you can leave it for 15 minutes or more. There's usually a couple fasteners on the back. Once you take it out, you just unplug the pieces as needed and then set it aside carefully. Now, in order to get your own stitching cover made to your specifications, first thing you're going to do is go to StitchingCover.com, just like the box says. Now, you can go to them on either like a mobile phone or a desktop computer, but once you get there, here's what you're going to find. First thing you want to do is go up to your top left, use your drop-down menu, and then you're going to go down to the shopping. Second option, click the down arrow, and it depends on what you're going to look for. If you want something custom or something kind of off the shelf, you're going to pick either custom steering wheel cover or the USA Warehouse steering wheel cover. There is a third option for more customizations, but I already know what I'm going to choose with my C5 Corvette, so I'm going to go into the custom steering wheel cover. I'm going to scroll down to Chevrolet, then I'm going to scroll down until I see the C5 Corvette. Now the first images you show up are going to be an S1, S2, S3, S4 across the top. Now what those are standardized options. They are predetermined with leather. You can see S1 has the red, kind of the racing stripe at the top. Those are leather with predetermined. S2 has gray, S3 switches up between carbon fiber there and leather, and then S4 mixes in other pieces. Now if you want them standardized, you can go ahead and select one of these top ones. For me, because I have plaid interior on the Corvette, I wanted something specifically different than a standard option. So here's what I'm going with. I went down here and chose the common materials. Now you can look it through on the recommended or the Alcantara, but for the common materials, I wanted genuine leather on the top and the bottom, and I wanted a perforated Alcantara on the left and the right. I also wanted a blue, kind of the racing stripe at the 12 o'clock position, and I wanted light blue stitching in order to match what was already in the car with the black and blue plaid. So with the common materials, I can choose the top and bottom. I can choose genuine leather. And with that, I just stayed with black. That was pretty simple because the car is already black. But if you wanted a red or a blue or a brown, it's available. On the left and the right, I wanted suede. And with that, I did want just similar black. Now you can see the second option there with black is the black perforated suede, which is what I chose. Did I want the marker at 12 o'clock? That was a definite yes. And with that, I wanted a deep blue. So there's my blue leather. And then on the thread, I wanted a light blue to help tie in to the plaid in the car. Now, they also do ask for a picture of the steering wheel. So with this one, I went ahead and took a picture of the steering wheel in the Corvette. Now, the C5 only has one available option for the steering wheel. It's pretty standardized, so it's no big deal. But you get into multiple vehicles, like you get in some trucks, you get into some other cars that have multiple options for steering wheels based on trim. Now, once you added that in there is an option there for the paddle shifter or the button on the back. For us on the C5 Corvette, there is no option, so you can hit no. Your car model information, you can just put in there what model year it is, if it's a 1999 or 2002 or 2004 Chevrolet Corvette. You can put in what trim level it is. It really doesn't matter. It's the same wheel for us. And then if there's any other questions or comments, you can add those in there. Now, once you have the add to cart, you choose your payment option and the order will be placed. Now, anything that's kept in the American or USA warehouses typically will arrive in less than a week, or let's say a week in general, depending on the weekends. If you have something custom like I did, it took about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks to be made and shipped to me, and then I was ready to go. Now, once your kit is delivered, you're going to find that it comes in a nice box here. Inside the box, you're going to get a set of instructions, tucking tool, your thread that will sew on, a thimble for your fingers so you don't poke yourself, some 3M double-sided tape in case you need it, and of course, your custom steering wheel cover. All right, so now we're going to move on to the installation piece. Before you get started and doing anything inside the car, make sure you do have your ignition key. As you sew this cover on, you're going to want to be able to turn the wheel left and right. And having the ignition key, at least to be able to turn to the on position, is going to make it to where the wheel can turn left and right without the steering lock. Now, the first step in the process is we're going to take our cover and we're going to install it over our wheel. Now, you may find it easier to do it from the front and kind of slide it on, or you can put it all the way over the wheel, kind of slip it over the back and around the bottom, and then pull it as it goes. I would suggest putting one hand on top, so put the cover on top here and start working your way around, and then start working your way around. As you come around a piece, remember this should be very tight on your wheel, so it's going to have to stretch just a little bit to get over it, and then you're going to start aligning up your spokes on here. And for me, there's a 12 o'clock position, so it should be dead center top on here for the steering wheel. That should match up. Now, once you have your cover in place, you can go ahead and double check everything to make sure it fits. And then we're going to get our thread, a needle, and our instructions to make sure we're going to follow the diagram in the instructions. So the first step in the process, once you have your cover on, we're going to start sewing. Now you can see on the C5, there are going to be 4 pieces. Obviously, there's one to the bottom left, the very bottom here at the 6 o'clock position. You have one over here on the right, and then you have your major one across the top. Now for this one here, I'm going to start on the bottom center. Just easy because it's already there once you have your cover in the 12 o'clock position. Now to start this process, I've pulled this piece back. I've threaded the blue thread here. You can see through the needle that comes with the kit. And then I've pulled back the top here, and I'm going to thread this needle through the very first stitch. Now when I pull this back, thread the needle through, and then I'm going to pull this needle through, and it'll pull the thread through the top stitch here. I can then tie a knot in this, so the thread that I'm going to sew the cover together with will be tied to this, rethread it, and then stick it through the back like the instructions say, so that I'm going to start on the front. Okay, so there's the knot tied through the top stitch. Now I'm going to cut this extra little piece off here just to get rid of that extra, and then I can re-thread my needle. Now the reason I do this is it provides me I guess I should say an anchor point, so that I can't pull the thread away from this cover. If you just loop it through or just pull it through, it may come through and pull through the leather or your material, and I do this just so that it cannot do that. So once I cut this off, I'm going to fold this back over and start weaving back and forth through the stitches in order to get to this top piece over here. So here's just a quick look at the thread now pulled through the cover itself. You can see I pulled on to the back side of it there. Now I need to take my thread and needle and go on the outside. So as I piece these together, I pinch them together here. I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to go with the needle. I'm going to go to the back side of it, through, and then come around the front here, around the back side, and through. Once I get a couple of these down into this better section here, I'll show you what that process looks like. But it's just a matter of kind of going backwards, forwards, just to add tension, and you're going to go stitch by stitch to pull it all together. Okay, so here's a look at our first little section that I'm sewing. So I started in the top right there. You can see just in the back, there's my little knot, my little anchor knot as I call it. And as I pull it through, and as you start to stitch around, I'm going from back to front on this. So I started in the back, came to the front, and it's basically the same stitch. So you start on this top stitch here. So you pass through the back stitch, you go through the top front stitch, come all the way out, and then you pass the needle back down in through here, and then again, second and second, third and third, fourth and fourth, etc., etc., etc. Now, one thing you're going to find as you start sewing down here is you're going to feel like the material just isn't big enough. It's just not enough to touch itself. Your stitch line here should be directly above, when you fit this in, it should be directly above the steering wheel stitch. So you can kind of see down in here, this is my OEM leather stitch, and this is where my stitch is that I'm now putting on for the cover. What you'll do if you find that your material just doesn't feel like it's big enough, you can do two things. You can lightly heat it if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. My temperature in the shop is about 70 degrees now, so it's in a good condition for leather to do it. You can kind of squeeze it with your fingers, and you can also pass your needle back through your stitches, a few stitches back. So if I'm stopping here to film, right here, I can go back up here into my curve, and I can pass the needle through my stitch here, and I can pull up. And what that's going to do is pull the material closer, and it will pull the stitches tighter to themselves. So once you pull, if you pass this through, you pull this up. Now this is the thread from between the stitches here. So I'm taking that, pulling it up, which adds more tension, takes out any extra thread in there. It's going to pull your material taut, and that's where you see your pattern. That's kind of notched pattern going back and forth. That is because I'm pulling extra material. So I'm pulling there, adding more tension, pulling it between the stitches. Now as I do that, I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to take my other hand and hold the thread so that it does not kind of retreat back to the steering wheel. So I'm going to pull it up, hold it with my thumb or my thumb and finger on one hand, and then I'm going to take the needle out. I'm going to go probably the next stitch down, do the same thing. I'm going to pull, and it's going to want to pull this material back, and that's okay. Let it pull it in, and you're just going to work stitch by stitch by stitch by stitch, and you're going to pull this taut. Now as I get down here, you can see it's starting to open back up. So I'll put in another 4 or 5 stitches down here, and then I'll take my needle out from the thread. I'll go back in, and again, I'll re-tighten, I guess you'd say, re-pull this to make sure that this is good. Now you will notice once you do it, your leather or your material here is going to pull itself together, so that you won't be able to see down in there. See how taut that is all the way down from right here? This has already been done, and now I'm starting to work on this bottom section, stitch by stitch. But you should have a nice stitching pattern all the way down. There it is, good focus. But you should have a nice material touching as you pull these stitches in. You don't have to go crazy gorilla strength on it. They'll pull together, and then as you keep going and working your way down, and as you get to this top, this will all pull together because these are pretty loose up on this end. Okay, so here's going to be our first section done. You can see everything is nice and taut, and right down in here, this is touching the whole way across. See if I can get a good picture of that. So this is good all the way here. It took me about 5 or 6 tries, really just kind of work it all the way in. A little bit of heat on the leather to make sure it was nice and warm, and it would stretch, and then just stretching literally every stitch by stitch by stitch, going all the way across. And then it will pull all the way up to the edge. Now I need to go around here, start working on the next piece here, probably this small 2 pieces on the side, and then I'll tackle the big one all the way around. All right, so here's going to be our finished product of the install. I've got the airbag back in, the horn still works, so everything is good. I'm going to pull outside to get some final video and photos. But here are some notes I would say on how to install this and what's going to make it easy for you. So to get started, a lot of times you're going to start sewing. You're going to get your thread, right? So your thread comes on these little spools. That is what's going to tie your pieces together, or your halves together. The length of this thread is going to depend on what you're sewing. So I'm going to give you this recommendation based on what I had here. So if you think about this, on at least this Corvette wheel, there are 4 different sections you're going to sew. There's the very bottom, there's the very top, this big one, and then you've got these 2 outlets. On these bottom ones, I'm going to suggest that if you're going to cut off a piece of thread to sew with, make the bottom 3 times the length of what the sewing is going to be. On the top, I'm going to say at least 2.5. So if you take your thread here, you unspool it, you kind of hold it up and get it all the way around this edge, all the way around, that would be 1. So then you can take it, go back over here, that is 2. And if you take it and go back to basically the top dead center, that is 2.5. Now that length of thread is going to be too long. It's going to be more than you need to sew this, but as you sew it all the way along and pull it tight, you're going to get some of that thread back. Now at the end, that's going to give you a good, a little bit of a section there that you're going to have to tie off and cut off to get out of there, but that's going to give you a good working length. Now with my kit, they came with 2 of these. So the very top one, I used 1 of these kits here itself because of the length. And then on the bottom 3, I used the other piece. Now again, three times the length on the bottom of each of these 3, 2.5 on the top. And you can always make it 3 all the way around. It won't matter. Now, secondly, to get this project done, I broke it up into small pieces based on my spare time. Since it is kind of winter months, it didn't matter. I wasn't driving the car. But plan on a few hours to get this done. And once I had it all sewed in there, one thing I found is that I really didn't like the alignment on some of the stuff. And even halfway up this big one, I realized that my alignment mark, my 12 o'clock marker here, was off a little bit on the stitching. I was just off 1 stitch, and that's all it really took. So I ended up unstitching it and redoing it again. So if you find on any of these that your halves, right, you have, if you're doing a transition from a left, like a top to a side, where mine is leather on top, Alcantara on the side, as it wraps around to itself, it should roughly match. If it's off a little bit, then you might be off a stitch, and you might need to unstitch it to get back to a good point and start over. Don't be afraid if that happens. If you make a mistake and it gets in there and it's like, oh, it's off, just unstitch it. It's just thread. Just go ahead and take the stitching back out and then redo it. It's no big deal. And lastly on this, I used some of the 3M tape that came with it. I didn't use a lot. I really used it down here on the spokes, on the sides, just along the edge, just to make sure that it stayed adhered right here at the top. You can leave the width, just cut a length, maybe, I don't know, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and just put it on there. And that'll just help support it as it goes under the material. Otherwise, this is a fantastic wheel. Really excited by it. I've wanted to do something here. I just didn't know what until I came across this from StitchingCover. And I got to tell you, it was worth the effort. This is going to be something that people notice and ask about. So I've got links down in the description for everything for the kit here and any kind of tools. I used obviously a ratchet and a Torx bit to come out to take the airbag out. Now again, you don't have to take the airbag out. That is what I wanted to do just to see how it tucked in there. But if you're not worried about it, go ahead and tuck it in there. It'll be just fine. You don't have to take it out. Any questions or comments, leave them down below. Check the video description for links over to StitchingCover's website. Get yourself a kit. I think you're going to really enjoy this. Now let me get this outside and really see it out in the sunlight.